Hey there, my name's Mark McCartney, and welcome to the What is a Good Life podcast. Over the last 3 years, I've interviewed over 200 people around this question, not to prescribe you with the universal answer, but to help you to find and define your own answer to this question. I'm hoping that in listening to the guests' curiosities, inquiries, and explorations, that it will prompt your own and give you a little bit more clarity on one of the bigger questions in life. Well, I'm also trying to share with you what I perceive to be more genuine expressions of the human experience and indeed meaningful conversations. Which brings us to this week and the 62nd episode of the What is a Good Life podcast, and I'm delighted to introduce Julia Duthie as our guest. Julia is a partner at PEPCO LLP, the best-selling author of The House on Dogbone Street, and the former CEO of both the Academy of Contemporary Music and the True School of Music. Simply put, I find Julia's life story to be incredibly inspiring. She left home and school at the age of 16 after a challenging and troubling childhood, as we discussed in this episode, in which she takes us on a journey from working in vegetable market stalls for food in her teens and living in highly neglected conditions to being managing director of an IT company in her mid-20s. From her experiences and realisations in therapy to opening up about her past, letting go of shame, and the death of her own father sparking her own desire to connect more fully with who she really is, prompting her to accept her sexuality at the age of 50, connect with her creativity, and write a best-selling book, which is also completely frank about what presently troubles her and where she suspects she has more to explore in terms of her own childhood. This episode will offer plenty of inspiration regarding how Julia has lived such a vibrant life in the face of such a difficult upbringing, while her willingness to explore and be more fully herself, as well as the meaning and sense of belonging she is discovering along the way, will give you so much to contemplate as well. Look, I really enjoyed this conversation with Julia. It's the second time I've spoken with her, and she was just the same person, whether it was on the recording or not. So I find her earnest nature and the authenticity in which she shares this life story to be as refreshing as the inspiration which I took from it as well. And so I'm sure you're going to take a lot from this conversation. And if you do, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're on the podcasting platforms, please continue to leave your lovely reviews, as it's of a huge help to me at this stage of my podcasting journey. And I'll also encourage you to go check out my newsletter on Substack as well, which is at www.whatisagood.life. And if you'd ever like to get in touch with regards to any one-on-one coaching or indeed executive leadership programs that I'm currently offering with regards to building trust and authenticity amongst leadership teams, please do get in touch. So having said all that, without further ado, the 62nd episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. Julia, thank you very much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Having spoken with you previously and knowing about your story, I've been really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Mark. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm keen to get into this.
Well, I won't delay then with the first question as ever, which is there a question you're trying to answer as you move through life?
Yeah, well, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. I knew this was coming. And it actually only came up quite recently. I've got a dear friend of mine who's known me a long, long time. And she said something like, but what is the real you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm still working that out. So I think it's that. I think I've spent my whole life to now and probably will continue kind of knowing what's the real me. Because I'm quite multifaceted, as you'll come to establish on this. So, and her thing is, well, how much of that is what you do because you learned those things, and you learned that those things worked, versus who is the real you? What's underneath all of that? What is the real Julia, or who is the real Julia? So I think that's the question I still grapple with, and gosh, my mid-50s now. So yeah, that's the answer.
What a gloriously big question. um, could you kind of give us your, I guess, like your kind of evolution with that question, or how you've how that's evolved or developed for you as you've moved through life?
Yeah, I guess it stems from, I mean, her question stems from, if you go back to my very early years, um, a lot of what I learned, I had to learn through kind of just basic survival instinct. Very briefly, I was kind of born to a very depressive mother. I am that kid that wasn't held from the start. She died in a mental institution shortly after. Never had a relationship with her, and gosh, we're going back She died 45 years ago. So when I say to people, I've lived on this planet 45 years without a mother, you actually need to add a few more on and say, well, I never had one at all. So, and my dad's coping mechanism was to be largely absent as well. So it was that childhood of trying to raise yourself, which has some advantages. You get incredibly capable, you get resilient, you get to express yourself fully because there are literally no boundaries. But it's also obviously full of yearning and loss. And I think I filled that yearning and loss by just being really good at things and clever and quick-witted and capable and useful. I mean, I joke that I think I even put it in my book actually, that I used to go to my friend's dad's house and alphabetize his video collection so that he would be look kindly upon me and invite me back because I really wanted to go back and have tea and things like that. So all the things that kids took for granted, I had to kind of hustle for just so I could get my sort of basic needs met. So I think that's the origin of a lot of the long-standing exploration I've been doing through my life. And there are other threads as well, which I'm sure we'll get into, but that's the origin of it. It's like, you know, just be good at things, be be attractive, shall we say, to whoever, so that you can get your needs met.
Well, that's quite an introduction to life, isn't it? Like that's
Yeah, quite a baptism. I wouldn't recommend it, but you get the cards you're dealt, and I am the sort that would wake up every day and say that's not so great, but let's see what we can make of the day. So, and I'm still like that now. So maybe that's the gift I was given.
when did just out of interest, when did you kind of realize that this was or you were comfortable with kind of saying, okay, there was a yearning for things, there was an absence of something, and but then also holding this perspective that other things came from that you'd kind of view as like that enabled you to develop or to that became, I don't know, attributes for you as well.
Um, if honestly, about 3 years ago,
Hmm.
it's only recently I've started to really open up and talk about these things. I kind of held it as a little bit of a secret shame of mine because when you're trying to be bright and shiny all the time, you don't really want to tell people that you grew up in a house full of dog mess and had no working kitchen or functioning bathroom and all the things that are associated with that. You hide that shame because that's not what people want to hear, and it's not the kind of um, brand Julia that I was going for all these years. So I kept it quite under wraps, and then I kind of hit 50, and because several things happened at once. I hit 50, and my dad died roughly that, yeah, it was 2019, maybe slightly before. And it was almost like the game was up. I looked at him and he was so, I mean, it sounds really stupid, but he was so dead. Like I was looking at his hands and going, those hands are never going to move again. His eyes are never going to see anything again. His mouth is never going to touch anything again. And I looked at him and I just thought, what am I doing? I'm not being honest. I'm not living an honest life. I'm living a life that people want me to, or I think people want to see, but it's not true. It's not real. So I went into this big old introspection after that, with a counsellor as well. It wasn't completely unaided, but I went to this deep introspection, and so many things sort of fell out of that. But yeah, I remember that relief, not at his death as such, although I did. It sounds really strange, but I wanted him to die for him. He was in such poor state by this point. Um, but I was relieved that I could now. It felt like that was the trigger point for me to start living fully as my true self. Um, I don't know if it was him or if I don't know if it was mortality, but something happened on that day, and I've been completely authentic and transparent since then.
Well, what an experience! Even just the sense of not just that the person looks dead, but just going through all the different components of the body almost, and the senses, and realizing that these things aren't they're not going to function again in the way that they used to. Like, that sounds really like a really kind of stark moment, or a really large moment.
Yeah, and there was another shift that happened that day because, again, I never publicly talked about this. This was always another secret shame of mine. Um, but I looked at him, and my dad was born in 1929, at a time when, it wasn't really okay to be anything other than people's expectations of you. And yet, my dad was a very flamboyant man. He was a very, um, I guess, we used to call him the sort of Peter Pan like. He just wanted to play. So when I say largely absent, it wasn't like he was a freewheeling, kind of boozing, kind of party guy. He was very effete and very kind of, he felt comfortable, most comfortable when he's at his amateur dramatics, for example, and his tennis club and things like that. And it was so obvious to all of us, his children. I'm one of four siblings, that he was gay. But he was grew up in a time when he wasn't really okay to be gay, so he just wasn't public about it. But we all knew, and we'd met many of his partners along the way. Um, but I just always had sort of rejection of that, because I had negative associations with that side of him, because that was the side of him that took him away from us.
Hmm.
Because he couldn't be authentic in his own home, he had to go and be elsewhere. So I always thought, well, this is just, this is a terrible thing. Why would anybody want to be that? Um, Knowing full well that I was as well, but I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't connect with it even in my own body. I just didn't want to be that, because that took you away from people. And when you are growing up without connection, you deeply, deeply need connection. If you don't have parents, you find connection everywhere, and you hold on to it for dear life. So to me, I was in a very loving, stable relationship with my ex-husband. I had, I have two wonderful children. Um, I didn't want to break any connection with anyone, so I buried that whole thing so deeply. But then when I saw him, and he was, prone and skeletal, to be frank, and I remembered the vibrancy of him and the vitality of him at my age, but also the sadness in him that he was alone. He didn't have a partner. He didn't have a special person, because after my mum died, he never remarried or replaced her in any way. And I remember saying to him, actually, what am I supposed to do now? You're not here. You're
Hmm.
the only person I probably could have talked to about this feeling, and now you're gone. And it just all came crashing in. I mean, really came crashing in. And I just felt about 5 years old in that moment. And although we'd had quite a complex relationship, quite estranged, people would say, um, I really I needed I needed him in that moment, and um, I felt completely untethered, and he was my grounding, and I didn't realize it until he'd gone. So I did go into a bit of a tailspin, but it led to really deep introspective work where I worked out who I was, and that continues, of course. But I knew I had to do something before it was too late, and that was the moment.
And how did I know you're saying you were untethered there. Like, how did you start to feel grounded again in this process?
Um, Honesty. I think I was pushed into honesty, pushed in the gentlest of ways. I found a therapist, and again, I joke in my book that I just picked the first one that started with A, and I was really quite belligerent about it. Like, I knew I needed one, but I didn't want one. And again, in the book, I talk about when I first walked in. I walked in like I was going into a hostile business meeting, and I'm like, literally was going, right, I'm here, but we're not going to talk about this, this, or this. I'm not interested in that. These are the parameters. Don't bother with this thing. She'll never get through to me. And I'm probably going to tie you up in knots, and I will not be honest with you anyway. So it's probably a waste of time. So let's leave it, shall we? And of
What an
course,
invitation.
yeah, I know. What a treat. What a treat for her. Yeah, but I mean, we're still in each other's lives now, and I still see her from time to time professionally. And oh, she always jokes about that day. She's, I don't know. I'm not allowed to swear, am I? But she said something about it.
Yeah,
And
you're more than welcome to swear if the mood takes you.
oh well, no, just well, I'll be quoting anyway.
Right.
No, I'm not going to go there. She. Let's just say she was pleased with this new challenge, and after I left, she sort of swore to herself, like, this is going to be great,
Yeah.
So she was excited because I think someone like me doesn't walk into her door very often, with such a sort of complex background, but at the same time with such I present very strong, but I'm really not. I'm like a proper love bunny, soft puppy type, but I can present strong when I need to protect myself, and I was doing that, but she could see it straight away. She's like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing." So yeah, with her really, her guidance and her nudging me and making me have to address things and actually get into stuff, which I've long avoided, shall we say.
And when you said at the start the question of what is the real me, how has that become clearer then over like the last few years? What would you say has fallen quite clearly into place or into focus for you?
I think obviously the sexuality part was a big deal. It's such a fundamental. Anyone who says that they can, lie to themselves their whole lives and not worry about it because it's just one aspect. Um, the thing about not being true to your sexuality is you are not true to yourself, and therefore you're not truly authentically connecting with anyone. You're always holding something back. It's either for fear of being found out. You might make a slip up statement, or genuinely you just feel the need to protect yourself. So I think I've outwardly been very gregarious, and I've got very loving and authentic friendships, but I always held a bit back for fear of that exposure. So I think, coming out, I hate that phrase, by the way, but being my true self, let's call it that, um, that had a transformative effect on my connection with myself, because I felt whole, I guess. Um, my new partner has been amazing. She's very strong in herself, but very gentle. I think it's all I've ever wanted. Just that I had a constant yearning for it my whole life, but I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know how to be honest about that. And she's allowed me, if you like, or that love has allowed me to take all the layers off that I had before. And it's really hard. It's a terrible thing. It's incredibly frightening to peel it all back and say, hey everyone, this is me now. But once you get through it, I've been focusing a lot on the subject of belonging lately, and I just feel like I can go anywhere now, like literally turn up to anything, anytime, any subject, any situation, and just say, hey there, hey, what's going on? What's new? And just trust that I'm going to be all right,
Yeah.
because it doesn't really. There's nothing you can do to me, world. You know what I mean? In a way, it feels a bit like that. It's like, oh, well, that's fine. Whatever happens, it's going to be all right. And I've never felt that before. I was always quite tooled up and ready, um, for whatever came. I was a little bit prepared, which is a kind of a defense in itself, isn't it? Um, I know I'm answering this in a very long way, but I I always felt I was in a fight or a struggle, and I would put myself through some really hard things just to prove that that was true. I gave birth at home with nothing but a paracetamol twice. Um, I had surgery on my shoulder awake because I wanted to be there and see it. These are good things, are very brave things, but now I'm like, no, I don't want to be there. You're in charge of that. I'll just trust you. I'll just trust that you know what you're doing, and I don't have to be so present and so prepared and so kind of, I suppose some people might say in control, but I certainly didn't like it when other people took any kind of control of me. But now I just don't mind. I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't go to surgery school or aeroplane school or baby making school. I haven't been to any of those, so I'll let you do that, and I'll
Yeah.
just do my bit." So that's been radically different, and I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm being my most creative now. I'm writing, I'm you know doing this, I'm doing talks, I'm doing all kinds of things that I think before I wouldn't have done, because I wouldn't have been brave enough, because I didn't feel whole in myself. So that's a long answer. Sorry about that.
No,
But
no, geez, it's a lot
you can
easier.
edit most of that
No, no,
out.
no, no,
Just keep the good
definitely.
stuff.
It's all good stuff. Trust me, it's a lot easier in this seat when they're longer answers rather than shorter answers.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, you're in good hands with me then.
Yeah, well,
Um,
another thing I kind of suspected that would happen though, you kind of say a number of things and then almost like five thoughts in my head would split off for where I'd go next, which is a luxury as well.
okay,
So
if you say so.
I may ask later about how that shoulder surgery was. But for now, yeah, I guess I just even to reflect, there's something really lovely there in the sense of I think before I experience a sense of belonging in my life, and I'd say recently as well, like and I'm 40, like and after like a decade of really searching or exploring myself and different things like this, and there's something so kind of counterintuitive to just what you said that really resonated about almost trying to fight the world, strategize, seek threats, look for problems, be proactive, maybe even create conflict. For me now, I'm not assuming this in you, maybe even create
Mm,
conflict when it didn't need to be conflict.
yep.
And and then the kind of ease if we find a sense of belonging within ourselves, like and it doesn't seem to me anyway, it doesn't seem as much outcome related. There's just a trust that whatever is going to
Yeah.
come up, that I'll be okay in whatever situation may present itself.
It's so transformative. It's like, I mean, I can't even really. I'm still working it out in terms of how to articulate it. It does take me. It's taking me time to do that. I'm having to work it through my writing and my conversations because it's still not complete in my head. How to express the difference between before and after, almost. Um, but it is like occupying yourself, I guess, fully,
Hmm.
as opposed to wanting other people to um, put stuff in. I don't know. That still doesn't quite work for me, but it is like that. It's like, I don't know. Before I would have felt a bit like empty vesseled, and I would be seeking people to put some good stuff in. So, excuse me, put some good stuff in, like, oh, tell me I'm good at this, or reflect back on me the things that I'm needing, or um, a whole bunch of external validation that would never really did the job. It was always on to the next thing. But now I'm still doing as much as I ever did, but I don't feel vulnerable in it. I feel like I'm doing this because I want to do it. It makes me happy. It's satisfying. I like the creative process. I like being helpful and useful, but it's not for um, any inner need to be validated or filled. It's just I want to do it, and it's a totally different feeling. And as I say, I'm still struggling with how to express it, but that's the best I can do at the moment. Is like to say I just feel completely occupied. I feel fully occupied in my own self, which is
Yeah.
we're getting there. It's a work in progress, Mark, but I will get there.
But this, can you describe to me then how how this led to how this affected your relationship then with creativity. Like what did you start to notice? How did this start to loosen things up, or how did it give you kind of freedom even to write a book? Like how did some of this evolve?
Well, how I experienced it physically was everything just fell out of my head. Like I'd sit to write. I decided, I'd say, right, today I'm going to write this chapter. And this chapter is going to be roughly about this thing. And I would sit down and I'd put my fingers on the keyboard and I'd stop 2 hours later and it would be done. And it just came out exactly as I wanted it to come out. And, barring a few grammatical edits, nothing was changed. And I did that, what else? My book's 12 chapters. Is it 14? I don't know, some chapters. Every single one came out like that. It came out whole, like it was waiting all this time for me to just sit down and finally decide to do it. And that's freedom. That's freedom of expression that says, I can write exactly what I want, exactly how I feel about it. I've done the work, if you like, on understanding elements and being sure about my position on all of this and who I am. So then it just falls out. So from a creativity point of view, it just opened up everything.
What was it like putting all that down on paper and then sharing it?
Um, I know I'm supposed to say things like, I don't know, I felt vulnerable or scared or anything like that, but I really didn't. I was completely at peace with it. I was excited, actually. I wanted certain people in my life to read it first. Um, the book's actually dedicated to Catherine's mum, my partner's mum. It says for Dilys, and people who know me well are going, well, who's Dilys? Like, because I only really got to spend, well, a very short period of time with her mum, because the time I met Catherine, her mum had been diagnosed with leukemia, and we all knew it was a short-term gig. They said it would be 2 years, and it pretty much was. And it was important to me that she knew that she was leaving her daughter in safe hands. And I knew I wouldn't get the time to express to her fully, or for her to get to know me fully, to feel that trust. She would have done if we'd had years. She would have gotten to know me. I never really worried about it, in the sense I knew she could sense who I was from how I was, if you like. But it was important to me to get my story down and to her, and I got it to her just in time. I mean, she read the manuscript, and she wrote to me. I think it was exactly 2 weeks before she died, to say all the things she wanted to say about it. And it was, my heart was just full. I was just like, thank goodness. I didn't know she was going to die 2 weeks later. That was a shock to all of us, even though we knew it was coming. But to have the opportunity to put those words down, and the last chapter is called Catherine. It's all about how we met and how we are. I was excited about that. I wanted to share it. And I wanted to share it with many people, I suppose, who may have made assumptions about my upbringing. As I say, I present these days as pretty, I don't know, people often think I've come from privilege, um, which I find really interesting because, well, I haven't, for a start. I think, I experienced extreme poverty, not, really extreme poverty, not having food, not having the right clothing for the right seasons. And I mean, I like one set of something outside of my school uniform. I mean, only eating school dinners because that's all there was. Fixing my own broken bones because there was no one to ask. I mean, I'm talking about some quite severe things. Um, and anyone watching this video will probably say, well, she can't have been that bad because she's got great teeth. People say it to me, they've got great teeth. You can't have been that bad. You've got great teeth. And I'm saying, do you know how much these teeth cost me over the years? I mean, I've had everything, Mark. I had 36 fillings. I had more fillings than teeth when I left home. I left home at 16 to make my own way, to get my own money. And one of the first things I did was go to the dentist and pay a dentist to sort everything out. So no, I've not come from any level of privilege, and my story is quite, um, I suppose, remarkable. And I don't know if we're going to get into this, but another question I have often struggled with was why did I get this outcome? Going back to Julia, I mentioned Julia earlier. Maybe I didn't mention her by name. A dear friend of mine who said, which is the real you. She's a really eminent child trauma psychotherapist. And I remember being in the back of her car, just being in the back of her car. I was probably in my 20s or so, maybe, known her a long time. And she was another person, a lady, got into the passenger seat, and they were nitter nattering at the front. And she turns to Julia and says, "Oh, who's this in the back then?" And I was only vaguely listening. And Julia said, "Oh, this is my friend, another Julia." And she turned to her friend. She's darling. She's a darling girl, that Julia, and she's had the worst case of neglect and abuse I've ever had to deal with. And she's a miracle. And I'm in the back going, "What?" I mean, literally, I went, "Me? Are you kidding me?" I was in such denial about it. I just couldn't connect with it at all. I was like, "No, no, no, I'm fine. Oh, look at me. I'm doing great. Got this big job. I got this big life. What, you can't be talking about me." And such is the survival instinct of all of us, really. You just reframe it. I just reframed it, all of it, and said, "No, that was all fuel. That was power to my elbow. That was character building." I came up with all these things to say that, it was fine. But of course it wasn't fine. And when I wrote my book and I put it out into the world, it came back with, "No, that was far from fine." And in a way, that was the catharsis. It was the catharsis of saying, "No, it wasn't okay. And the things that happened to you were not okay. And you don't need to pretend anymore, and you don't need to hide that anymore. You can just put it into the world and say, right, there it is." So to answer your question directly, um, it was a very empowering experience, but not at all scary. I felt very excited about it, like it was finally time to put it out there. So yeah, that's how it felt.
Could you I'll be mentioning this in the intro as well, just of some of the roles that you fulfill and some of your bio, but what did that look like from going out at 16? And I'm not saying roll out your CV here or something like that, but just how did that how did that take shape? Like that you come from this you have this upbringing, this background, which you're saying, "Oh wow, I kind of realized in hindsight that this wasn't okay, or this wasn't fair." Then to doing what you ended up doing, then how did that take shape?
Well, I in the book I call it the hustle. I started with the hustle, um, and I was always the bright and shiny hustler. So I would go up to people in market stalls and go, kind of Oliver Twist style of, "Hello, mister. Um, can I help you with your fruit and veg?" And it literally started with things like that. "Can I help on your fruit and veg stall?" Because I needed money, and I thought, well, I can get money and I can get free food here. This is a good situation. Um, my very first gig was actually helping out at the local outdoor swimming pool. I had nowhere really to go in the daytime, so it was like I could just go there for free as long as I helped out. And again, they would always I get free lunches, and I could get, just to hang out with good people, and I loved it. And I was a really cheerful person to have around because I was so grateful for anything really. I was just a happy little soul. Um, and then I guess that grew. I did a load of sort of semi-menial jobs, I guess. So I joined a local um, employment agency, and they sent me to do some weird things. I remember washing up petri dishes full of mold. I mean, I'm probably got some if they did a study on me, I'd probably get some rare disease that no one's ever seen just by sheer volume of how many Petri dishes I had to wash up. But I mean, what a mad job. But I loved it. I used to put a little radio on and wash up my little Petri dishes. And then again, it was the simple things like I used to get a bacon roll, and I was like happy with that. And then you fast forward that mentality, you know, I just was always looking for the next thing. I was always pushing myself, and I'm quite excitable and curious. So I'm like, what's next? And I got involved with IT, and of course with IT, that's everything. There's always something new and shiny. So I got involved with some new tech type companies, usually quite early. And I was a managing director for one of at the time, the largest multimedia firm at the time in mid-90s. And I became their UK MD at 26. You know, I was responsible for like $50 million or whatever that was then, 40 odd million pounds of business. And I was 26 years old. And it felt completely okay because of all that background. You know, I was always doing something, and you learn a lot of skills. So fast forward, you know, I've run major music institutes. Music has always been through my blood. I was I was a professional singer as well, somewhere along the line. So I guess I'm quite creative in lots of ways. But I always wanted to just do these things to entertain. It wasn't about ego. I honestly, it isn't. I People say, oh, you know, you get up on stage and you sing these songs, and you know, you must have an ego. And I'm like, honestly, I just want to make people happy, and it, you know, and if they're smiling back at me, that feels amazing. So I did a lot of that kind of thing, and I think that desire to be good at things and please people was all the way through my career. And I'm really hardworking for obvious reasons. So, oh, and something that someone said to me the other day, um, maybe this is attributed to my career successes. You always get the same one. You always get me. You don't get anything else. Even though I was hiding a fundamental part of myself, I don't I don't do that thing, you know, where you have a different way of being around different types of people. I'm pretty much myself everywhere I go, and I think that builds trust with people, and I think they just kind of like that. So yes, I've got a very long and illustrious career. I work for a really great company now, and I work with some of the brightest minds in their space. And yeah, and I belong there, and I feel comfortable. I feel happy, and I think I'm the only one without a degree. Oops, no one. I think everybody's got a degree, and like really good degrees. You know, Oxford, Cambridge types, and then there's just me. And you know, I left school with virtually nothing at 16, so I'm just like amongst all of this, and I don't feel inauthentic. I don't feel that imposter syndrome thing that people talk about at all. I just feel like, well, I know a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of life, and I'm here for as a force of good. I mean, my intentions are always good, so that makes everyone relax, I think.
I'm feeling very relaxed listening to you, and I'm just kind of wondering where, like, no, but
Does that
seriously,
mean you're falling asleep?
no, 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 no,
My
but
answers are too long.
no, definitely not like but no, but like but there, it's almost kind of, I don't know, it's almost, it sounds so remarkable, you know, what you're describing as the upbringing and then the experiences as you've gone through life, and then
Mm,
even to get to the point where your father has passed, and then you're like, okay, well, there's an awareness of the stuff that you were hiding, but then you've kind of gone into this, and then you've written a book even, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, I guess, what I was referencing is like, it's kind of incredible from such what you could maybe characterize as hardship or difficulties growing up, that there seems to be quite a lot of like flow in your life as well. And I don't mean flow as in the
mm,
state of flow, but you've kind of just moved through life, showing up, working hard, and trying to be in a positive force. Like, is that, am I way
mm.
too oversimplifying things there?
Well, if people haven't dropped off already, they should probably stay now, because now I'm going to tell you about the darker sides. Because there is a dark side. Of course, there is. There's a shadow side to everything, and my shadow side is I've had a lot of struggle. I mean, um, I've got a generally I like to play. Generally, I'm playful. Generally, I'm optimistic. Generally, I'm all the things that we've just talked about. But I have some days where it just everything just goes black. Just goes black. Nothing's good. I don't like anyone. I can't see the good in anything. And when I have those days, and they're infrequent, but when I have them, it's really devastating. It's like I have these, and the way I experience it is like really loud voices in my head shouting at me terrible things.
Right.
Like, and the most exposing and the most extreme one is obviously with anything, as most people experience, is with your direct partner. Catherine's wonderful. She's amazing. She's loving. She's caring. She's strong. She's a great defender and a supporter of mine. And yet, on a bad day, I can't see any of that. I just go, I don't see any of it. I don't see. I've got wonderful friends. They're not. When was the last time I heard from them?
Right.
Like, it could have been like 3 days ago. But in my head, where where are they? Where are they when I need them? Nowhere. And it's all nonsense. And 2 or 3 days later, when it passes, I look back and go, what on earth was that? And I've spoken to people about this because I struggle with it. And the general consensus is, when you have the first early years of your life, if you are not cared for, um, that something quite terrible happens to a baby, to a human being. Um, and that is that you fear that no one's coming. Like, literally. And I remember my cousin saying that when you were a toddler, you didn't speak, you didn't cry, you didn't say anything. So that she's a good few years older than me, and she said it was really odd. And when I've spoken to people about that, they said, well, of course you wouldn't have done. No one was coming. No one. You'd learned that. You'd learned that it's hopeless. Don't bother. And I can't even. And when I think back and I think about that baby, when I disassociated from it being me, and I could cry. I could say, gosh, what must that have been like to be so scared, because you are, as a baby, you don't know anything, and no one's coming. So I think the darkness in me is, when I can look back on the episodes, it's the total fear of abandonment, of disconnection. And then I go into a very, well, I don't need anyone place.
Right.
I've never needed anyone. I've done this all myself, which is of course nonsense. Nobody's self-made. We all need each other. And I've had an army looking after me my whole life. But in those dark moments, I don't need anyone. I can do everything myself. And it's getting less and less. But yeah, I've had pockets of my life where I've um, really felt quite lost in those moments. And I felt like it could never be made better.
Right.
That's the other terrible thing. It's like, I can't undo any of that. I can't heal it. I'll always be this person that suffers with this. Like, Mother's Day's coming, isn't it? I hate Mother's Day. I'm a mother. I've got two amazing kids. They'll make a fuss of me, but I can't bear it. I just can't bear Mother's Day, because of all those years of it meaning something else for me. Um, Growing up, it was always, at school, there was always a thing, make a Mother's Day card. And I remember acutely them saying, oh, just make one for your dad. And I was like, no, I don't want to make one for my dad. He's not my mum. And I suppose Mother's Day now is, when you are someone who can have darker moments, when they think about loss and disengagement and disconnection. It is about the only time of year. In fact, it was her birthday yesterday as well, so I thought about her then. But I don't think about her at all other than that. And I am forced to, if you like, on Mother's Day, and I don't like it. I just don't like it. Um, I mean, I know I'm going to have to deal with it. We found some letters recently, and there's nothing really on this earth from her. Like, I don't have any photographs really. I've got maybe 3 or 4 when I was a child. There's no evidence of her anywhere actually, other than that the 4 of us exist. So we found these a dozen letters that were written to my dad when I was, I think the earliest one I would have been about 4, and they're barely legible, and they're all kind of, I guess, really suicide notes. I mean, she didn't kill herself ultimately. It was the drugs she was taking that killed her. But they were all like, she's writing to me personally and putting it into my dad's letters, saying, "Dear Julia, I'm sorry I can't be with you. It's my time to die, and have a nice life," type thing. And I didn't discover these until my brother gave them to me last year, and I can't look at them. I can't deal with them. I can't connect with them at all. I don't want to. I don't want to go there. But I know I'm going to have to, because I think that's the source of the darker side of me. I know it's in there, and I'm not brave enough yet. And also, I'm not quite sure how to do it. I don't really know what technique or element of whatever is going to get me to actually really address it honestly, rather than just cognitively. So I think that's the source, and I think I just have to trust that it can be healed, because it just seems to be getting easier now that I am fully authentic, now that I am with an amazing partner that holds me in this space, and I've feeling much freer in myself. I think I will get there. I think before my time's up, I really do want to do that. But yeah, Mother's Day is tricky for me.
Understandably so, from that association, or that almost that confrontation that it brings.
Mm,
It's amazing though, the even the potential freedom that's coming from all these other things that you're exploring. I guess to even contemplate that, or even to hold that up as a potential desire to move towards or explore at some point, which I guess is kind of representative of all these other ways in which you're finding either a sense of belonging or finding out more about who you are.
mm. Yeah, it feels like it's the crux of everything. It's like that's probably the point about what's the real me. Because
Right.
say for example, I achieve this and I get to heal that childhood trauma, that baby trauma. What is what's left after that? I don't know. Maybe I won't be creative. Maybe I won't need to be.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll just be enough just showing up and just going, "Hi, I'm Julia. What's new?" Whereas at the moment, "Hi, I'm Julia. What's new? And how can I be helpful? How can I do some good here? How can I have some kind of purpose and meaning?" I wonder if I could heal that hurt. What's left? And maybe I might like it. Maybe I might enjoy that phase of my life where I'm not striving for something or struggling with something. Who knows? I'll let you know if I ever get there, if I ever do it. I'll ring you up and go, "Mark, I did it." And anyway, I wouldn't ring you up because I couldn't be bothered. I'll be too busy living in peace and quiet and contentment.
What do just the question that came in my head is like, I wonder what we still do in like, because stuff is still happening, right? I wonder what the relationship is, even with creativity. I wonder what the with a lot of different things. Because I always find it like one of my favorite artists is Francis Bacon,
Mm,
and he has these he seemed to have a hell of a life in terms of just alcohol, drugs, abuse at home, finding an abusive partner, all of these things. And and then just wildly dramatic things happening. So I always kind of find it kind of funny when people describe almost like these really methodical ways of finding peace and creativity within us, when I'm just like, look around us, there's also other sides to this too, right? Like it's not just this linear path of or a process of finding what we want to create. But I think it would be probably be very interesting to observe what would flow from one of us in a state of peace, in terms of what creativity might come to mind.
Let's see. We won't know until we get there. And maybe we never know. Maybe there isn't a moment. It just creeps up on you. I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah. When you mentioned earlier the sense of, you know, realizing, even if you go back to kind of putting that your father's neighbor's videos in alphabetical order, realizing that maybe that you were quite bright as well along the way, and then coupling that with pleasing people. Just out of interest, like, and then the various achievements that you had as well, that by any objective kind of measure would go, okay, I've gone somewhere in society, like I've done well.
Hmm.
How would you even compare those? And then the idea again, when you mentioned earlier, this like empty vessel feeling, or getting, requiring maybe other people's reflections or validations to fill you up in some way. How would you compare the experiences of kind of having gone about life that way versus the sense of belonging you're experiencing at this point in life, in terms of when you said that you feel occupied now? Like, was there a time where those things did distract you enough to maybe to not look, or to think that there was more, or was there always a sense that there was another way, I guess?
Um, Good question. I don't know if I talk about something like, I don't know, it's a silly example. But I remember I got my first. Oh, this sounds really, really. Actually, you just started when I got my first BMW. Even that, oh my God. But I did. I got my first BMW when I was 20, I think. Maybe not even that. I might have been, yeah, 2021, quite young. And I drove it to my dad's house to show him. And I wanted him to be proud of me. And my dad never drove. He never drove in his life. He rode a bicycle everywhere. So it's partly that he's not particularly interested in cars, but I would have liked him in that moment to have said something about it. I was proud of myself, and I wanted him to say, "I'm proud of you." And it didn't come, and I don't think he really ever did actually acknowledge any of my achievements. You know, on a good day, I'd say, well, he just loved me for who I was, but evidence is more likely that he was, you know, not terribly interested, actually, if I'm brutally honest. Um, and that stayed with me for years, and I was always looking for the validation and the external. I would go and look for it. I'd say, "What did you think of this? Was that good?" And and which does take the charm off things, doesn't it? If someone's actually saying, it's like scoring a goal and running straight to the team, going, "What did you think? Was it that? It was good, wasn't it? Do you like that?"
Yeah, yeah,
Rather than just enjoying the moment, you just, you're constantly looking for that review. And then you fast forward. I mean, in terms of the pinnacle of my life, I was little old me from, my nickname for my house. My book is called The House on Dogbone Street, and I named my road. It was a kind of a pet name for the road called Dogbone Street. So it's become a bit of a thing in my life, little old me from Dogbone Street, with everything else. I was in Forbes last week, and I'm like, this is the pinnacle. Oh my goodness, I'm in Forbes. And I'll tell you how I experienced being in Forbes. I promise you this is how it was. People were going, "Oh my gosh, you're in Forbes." And I'm saying, "Yes, but did you like the message? Did you like what I was saying? Did you like what I was trying to get across?" And that's the difference. The Forbes bit doesn't matter to me. What matters is, did you read it, and did it mean something to you? Did it um, hit you in some way? Did I get my message across? And I think that's the difference. And I think I've only just started experiencing that in that way. Prior to that, I was always looking for the pat on the back that said, you may not have had any of these things, but look how well you've done. And now I'm like, I'm not interested in that. I want to know, did you like what I wrote, and does it mean something to you? And to me, that's the big difference.
Well, that captures it really beautifully, like the almost like the transition from external metrics almost to discovering meaning,
Mm,
or like, yeah, that's really, really lovely. Look, Julia, just looking at the time here, and I think I'd love to chat with you again, because I knew that I'd probably have this experience where I've got several lines of inquiry that I'd still like to go through with you, but we wouldn't have the time for it. But just in terms of what you've been sharing, this realization in the over the last few years again of, this kind of burning question almost, as what is the real you, exploring that, the seminal moment with your father bringing this question closer to you, and even that getting comfort either with aspects of yourself, whether it's sexuality, whether it's creativity, whether it's just your own story, and even the changing in relationship with what that story brings up from you, with the continued exploration of that, obviously quite clearly is very important, as well as identifying things like meaning, belonging, even connection with yourself, with other people as well. And just, even elements, if we put them in as well, of just to look the significance of hard work, of
mm,
trying things, and then this beautiful way of describing that, whether it's having kind of hit all the achievements and then still feeling a sense of maybe need within that, but then also realizing now what's important to you, and obviously so much of that is in stepping into who you are, and realizing that more fully, wherever the hell that goes, whether that's to a peaceful state, a creative state, a blissful state, who knows, but we shall stay tuned. Really curious to hear your answer, Julia, to the question of what is a good life for you.
um, I want, more than anything, I want peace in myself. Honestly, I think, when you were summarizing there, that's the word that jumped out for me. It's like, and I just know it's going to be incredibly hard to get there, but I'm committed to it. I don't want to keep tooling up for the world. I'm less. I've got very few tools left. I've ditched them, but I've still got some, and I would like to have like a contented second half. A contented, um, less friction in my movement around it, and possibly even less direction. I don't know. I quite like to amble for the second half. I'd quite like to just, you know, potter about and trust that all will be well, and I don't have to make things happen. I don't have to do very much about it. Um, and I think, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. It's the feeling I get when I'm out in woodland and I'm just, you know, direction, just walking around, not thinking about being somewhere or going somewhere, just wandering. So I'm quite attracted to that idea. I'll probably be really purposeless and do nothing productive, just be completely hopeless. Um, but maybe it'd be worth it, and maybe I could just live peacefully, and maybe I could tell myself that I've done my bit, and it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be achieving anything anymore. Being you is enough. I don't know. What does that sound? Does that sound good, or
That
does that
sounds like
sound?
a no,
It
no.
sounds like a
That
waste of time.
No, no, no. That sounds gorgeous. The thought that came to my head was, geez, it sounds like you've done a lot already, even if that was the the way it goes. But I really like this idea, almost like of, I guess, like sauntering through the woods, and the analogy of that,
Yeah,
like, just the taking your time, maybe even the space for curiosity, or the space to go wherever that curiosity takes you within the woods, and
yeah,
and and like, yes, I think I'd be surprised if nothing were to ever happen. If you know something is always happening, we just I guess it depends where it goes. But look, Julia, thank you so much for all that you've all the insights you've imparted with us, the experiences, the stories that you've shared here. I found it absolutely fascinating, and I'm really really grateful for you joining us here today on the What Is a Good Life podcast.
Oh, Mark, honestly, I've really enjoyed this. I didn't know where it was going to go because, like, I didn't know. I didn't know. You can't really prepare for these things. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt really relaxed and happy to talk to you, and I've really enjoyed your questions as well. It's really it's felt like a really natural, easy conversation. So thank you.
Cheers, Julia.